Okay, so we have been in the letter to the Ephesians over the past several months. This morning, we're going to be going through Ephesians 6, 5 through 9. And so as you are turning there, just to catch you up, so over the past 3 weeks, we have been moving through what's commonly known as the Ephesian household codes. And so these writings are associated with the relationships that one would typically have with people within their home. And what it does, this section, is it addresses both the healthy authority and submission that happens within these relationships. And so we've looked at husbands and wives. The past 2 weeks, we've looked at parents and children. And now today, we're going to look at what the passage shows us, bondservants and masters. And so if you would, read or follow along with me, Ephesians 6, 5 through 9. It'll be up on the screen behind me as well. Bondservants, obey your earthly masters with fear and trembling, with a sincere heart, as you would Christ. Not by the way of eye service as people pleasers, but as bondservants of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart, rendering service with a good will as to the Lord and not to man, knowing that whatever good anyone does, this he will receive back from the Lord, whether he is a bondservant or is free. Masters, do the same to them, and stop your threatening, knowing that he who is both their master and yours is in heaven, and that there is no partiality with him. This is the word of the Lord. Now, in order for us to practically move forward with the teaching of this passage, because I'm just going to, big assumption here, I'm assuming there's not a bondservant-master relationship happening in your home today. And so part of what we're going to be doing here, two things, is we're going to draw some context. We're going to look at this practice of, and I'm not going to shy away from this word today, this practice of slavery that was happening at this time in the Roman Empire, and then how this historical relationship is actually more kin and practical for us today, more kin to the workplace relationships that we all have experienced. But before we do that, I'd like to give just an aim, like where we are headed with this message this morning, and that is that when considering Jesus as both loving master and suffering servant, how might we understand what it looks like to be under earthly authority and to hold earthly authority over another, both as bondservants of Christ? There's a lot in that statement. We're going to unpack that together this morning. But like I said, before we get into really more of the practical teaching today, I want to address this topic of slavery that was occurring at this time when Paul was writing the letter. So 2 questions I want to go through real quick. One, what is this bondservant-master relationship that we're seeing here? What was happening? And then the second is, why does Paul not immediately condemn this relationship here? Why does he not condemn it immediately? So let's start with what was happening. So bond-servant-master relationship. So at this time in the Roman Empire, there were an estimated 60 million slaves that were in the Roman Empire. As many as 1/3 of the largest cities in the Roman Empire were made up of slaves. And so it's just understood that nearly every single household during this time had a bond-servant-master relationship that was happening. And so Paul's speaking towards this. This was happening in most of the homes. Even more so in this church, in the Ephesian church that Paul's writing to, the body most certainly would have been made up of masters and servants. How do we know that? One is that, like we're talking about, the social framework was so prevalent. It was everywhere. So we just assume, okay, the church likely had both servants and masters. And the second is that Paul is actually addressing both of them in our passage. So it's abundantly clear. The Ephesian church was made up of slaves and masters. Now, when we think of slavery, that is such a hot button word. It's default for us to associate this relationship with what we modernly know as slavery, right? And so what I'd like to do real quick is do a quick reframe. What I'd like to do first is not shy away from a truth at that time, is that there are some inhumane aspects that are what we would commonly associate with slavery today. So at that time, these bond-servant-master relationships, the servants, the slaves, they were viewed as objects at this time. They were not legally persons. This was true at the time. Many suffered terrible abuses. Many were meaninglessly killed. We have documentation that there were several slave rebellions that were happening during this time, so we're not going to shy away from that there were several inhumane practices that are commonly associated with slavery today. Now, by this time period, slavery had actually experienced a significant reformation prior to what it had been before. The attributes of that are quite unlike the slavery we know today. So some examples were the treatment of slaves at this time. It had radically improved. It was really more likened to what we're going to talk about today, like a boss-employee type of relationship that was happening within the home. There were many slaves, like if you were walking out on the streets in Corinth, like you may not be able to discern who is a slave and who was a master. It wasn't immediately distinguishable between these two people. Many slaves were expected under Roman law to actually be set free, many by the age of 30, right? So it was rare to actually meet a slave that was in old age. Socially, slavery did not necessarily indicate one's social class. So like kind of a weird comparison, but there could be a slave at that time that was like a CEO of a company. Like it didn't necessarily indicate you couldn't have a certain social standing. And then some even willingly entered slavery as a means to like obtain citizenship or to be in a better place. Like there was this prevalence of unforced slavery that was happening. And so just under this context, overall what we see is that slavery, despite its continued inhumane practices and abuses that really have persisted into modern history, it was at this time far more humane, and it has striking similarities to the workplace. So again, that's where we're going to be taking a lot of the teaching today. And so all of these commands and teachings we're going to look at, they're applicable to us today. To us that are under earthly authority, and for those of us that have earthly authority. This could be in your workplace. This can really be anywhere in a relationship outside of the home where you have been entrusted leadership and authority or are under that. It's applicable. Okay, the elephant in the room. Why does Paul not condemn something that was so obviously inhumane? Why does he not do it? Okay, so I want to just take 2 points here. We're not going to be spending a ton of time here, but 2 points I want to aim at is one, is that this is not Paul's primary aim in his letter. So when following through the household code section, it would actually be quite out of place for Paul to suddenly step out of this authority submission conversation he's having and move into a discourse on condemning this bondservant master social order that, by the way, was so prevalent at the time. Paul's not writing this letter all of a sudden to just focus solely on social reform. See, Paul's intention in the letter to the Ephesian church is to seek to equip the church to walk in a manner worthy of the Lord within the objective relational realities of the day. See, you see what Paul's doing here. What he wants to do is he wants to insert the gospel of Jesus Christ in every single human relationship that exists today. This is Paul's aim, which brings us to the second reason. Why does he not immediately condemn? Well, Paul, he's calling the bondservants and the masters into this gospel, right? Into the church, which, by the way, if you know the gospel is a death knell to human slavery. It cannot stand under the gospel. See, here's what we understand of what Paul is doing here is in his direct addressing to bondservants and masters to the gospel, this gospel, it involves obedience by both parties to radical brotherhood, human recognition of one another, equal dignity and value before God, each person, bondservant and master, being saved under the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. See, if only masters and bondservants had adhered to the call of the gospel through history, we may actually have no recognition of human slavery today. I truly believe Paul knows that where he sends the gospel, this is the means to address any inhumane social practices that are happening. So this is his aim. So let's be rest assured there's no advocation just because he's speaking into this social relationship. There's no advocation for human slavery, but rather for a gospel to interfere greatly with a corrupted social order, and for each and every one of us to recognize that there is a slavery to which Paul is calling us toward. Like, he's not going to shy away from it. You're going to see this, the term slave to God. He's calling us toward this. That's going to be the meat of what we're going to be looking at today. So for today, we're going to study through this bondservant-master relationship. We're going to be looking into vocational work relationships from a practical standpoint. Now, while this passage, it may pertain to any lawful authority, we're going to be focusing on work. So let's do that. We're going to be moving into the passage here, and as we do, I'm very aware all of us are in different places vocationally in what we do for work. Some of us have authority over people. Some of us are part of multi-level teams, and we have a lot of bosses. I believe that both the teachings to those who have and are under authority, it's applicable to everyone here, okay? And so we're going to take a look, starting from the top of the passage. We're going to go through almost every word. So let's do that, and let's zoom in together on what Paul is teaching. And so the passage right up front. First, we're going to be talking about those that are bondservants, that are being supervised, that are under earthly authority. What is the command that we see up front in the passage? It says, bondservants, obey your earthly masters. Obey. Obedience. This is the call for one who is under authority. What does this obedience look like? Let's walk through this. First, bondservants, obey your earthly masters with fear and trembling. See, our service and obedience in the workplace, it must be rooted in what we're going to see. Fear and trembling is likened to respect and reverence for the one that we are under. See, the word that's used here, fear, the Greek word is phobos. Phobos. It can mean anything from respect and reverence to actual real terror. We see it more aligned in this passage as a respectfulness. And how do we see that? It's looking back just a chapter in Ephesians 5. The word phobos and phobeo are used in the prior chapter when speaking of respectful submission to one another out of reverence to Jesus. Phobos to Jesus. We also see a phobeo. It's used when discussing how wives must respect their husbands. And so we view the word phobos, this fear and trembling, in a similar respect, a respect for the one that you fall under in your work. Now, on the other hand, we can actually look at this fear and trembling aligning really well with real terror, too. Like, as far as bondservants or subordinates are under someone that they greatly respect, there's probably kind of like a fear of letting them down, a nervousness to let them down. So it can really work both ways. So what we typically may see is that a healthy, respectful, afraid to upset type of obedience, what it is, it finds its root actually in a fear and trembling of the role that is set ahead of them, really more so than the person that holds that role, right? Like, we believe that God has instituted all roles in work. Particularly, it talks about in Romans 13 when it's speaking about government authorities that the Lord has placed over us, that we know that there's no authority except from God, and those that exist that have been instituted by God. We believe that if you report to someone today at work, if you're under an earthly authority, that the Lord has placed that role, not only that person, but that role over you. An example, so in the Army, we've got some guys here that have served in the Army. They can speak to this probably better than I can. There is a profound respectful fear and trembling obedience that subordinate officers have to their ranking officers. And oftentimes what we see is that the subordinate officer may not even really know who their ranking officer is, but they know that role, right? So, for example, when a new president is elected, the president, one of his titles is Commander-in-Chief over the armed forces. And you'll see him when he gets off of the Air Force One and he's coming down the steps. The officers that are lined up at the bottom, they give him a salute. You see, they have a particular respectful obedience for that office. Really, we all do, often regardless of who holds that position, okay? Okay, so that's one, an obedience from fear and trembling. Two, what else does it say? Obey your earthly masters with fear and trembling, with a sincere heart. Sincerity. What does sincerity mean? Sincerity may be described as a singleness of heart, like obeying with an undivided aim, with no ulterior motives, a unity with the one whom you fall under. A way to think about this, maybe just some questions to ask yourself: am I sincere with whom I am under authority? Do I obey my boss because of our aligned vision in our work? Am I obeying because I am sincerely aligned with my superior? Are my motivations aligned? Or do I have a separate agenda that motivates my obedience? Does that make sense? Like, why are we obeying? Is it sincere, or is there an ulterior motive? I remember my first job out of college. I went to go work for one of those massive consulting firms. Now those are great firms. I know some of y'all that work in them, but you'd probably nod and agree with me. These large consulting firms, it's like a spaghetti bowl of mixed visions, aims, goals. Like I remember that the whole time I was there, I was like, I don't know who I am here. This is confusing. I remember coming in, I came in as an analyst, and what I soon found out was the analysts that were alongside me, here are the aims. We didn't really have any sort of alignment with the person ahead of us. What we had was, my aim is to make it to senior analyst. And then I want to be a consultant. And then I want to be a manager. And then I want to be a senior manager. And then maybe when I make it to the top, I'll start to have more of like a alignment with the company as a whole and really start to focus there. But really for me, when I was there, I had misaligned visions with my bosses all the time. I would obey simply just to get that promotion, to get a little more clout at the company. That's what my aim was. So, hey, I'll obey you to get there. Well, it ended up with me not really having much of a career there, just getting lost. My pride, my desire for rank and control and esteem, lack of sincerity with who I was under authority at that time. Paul is calling us away from this type of insincerity in our work. He's calling us away from this. To be of one mind with our earthly authorities and motives, and to seek the flourishment of our work together. Sincere obedience. Okay, 3. What does this obedience look like? We're going to keep trudging through here. So obey your earthly masters, fear and trembling, with a sincere heart, as you would Christ. We're going to come back there. Let's put a pin there. Not by way of eye service as people pleasers. Okay, so in obedience, not as people pleasers. Is there any worse place that fosters this type of behavior? Maybe I'm just like confessing on my own, but man, it is a daily struggle for me in my workplace to not try to be a people pleaser. Like, here's where my mind goes in the workplace. Oftentimes I'll come in, I want people to see me doing work, see my obedience, just to see that I'm working hard. I want people I want to deserve to be there. I want to be worthy of the salary that I'm being paid. I want to prove that I'm worthy of that salary. Now, these aren't bad things, but there's oftentimes, that's my focus. Just prove your worth. Prove your worth. Prove that you're worth it. I want to prove that I have value. And that's my aim. It's insincere at times. So I remember where this people-pleasing thing that really, in me, it's a fear of man at the end of the day. I was thinking back, like, man, when did all this start for me? Why do I struggle with this? I remember in high school, guys, I was on the football team, contrary to what you might believe. I used to lift weights back in the day. And second period was weightlifting time. And me and my buddy Taze, we were like the tight, like, hey, we're going to play football all the way through. We're never going to start, but we're going to make it through this program. And oftentimes that led to us just like trying to people please, to please our coaches. So in the weight room, the way it worked is there were like 4 different rotations, and there was a coach that would walk around holding all of us accountable. But what my buddy Taze and I, we'd be over on the bench press, and I'd be holding the bar, and he'd be kind of holding it for me, and he'd be like, wait. Coaches kind of come around, and then he'd go now. And then yeah, I'm doing it, yeah. See, coach, like, we wanted the coach to see that, like, we were working hard. Like, we deserved to be there. We had value. What was going on there? Like, why were we doing that? We were only obeying to be noticed, and we believed that our obedience was only fruitful if our master was seeing it. We thought any work outside of that, it's just fruitless. There's no reason to do work unless we're being noticed. You see, where this people-pleasing, it gave our coach the impression that we were working hard at all times to prepare for the big game. It was just a lie. Like people-pleasing in some ways, like it's lying to our boss. It's trying to show them something that we're not putting the hours in. We don't really care about the work. We just want to look like we're pursuing the work. Man, I struggle with that. You know, in the people-pleasing space, the truth, it eventually comes out. It eventually comes out. For us, it came out at Max Out Day, where coach was like, look, Ferguson was doing like 12 reps of 200. Ferguson, do your max out. And I didn't even come close. Like, the truth came out. Humble obedience. This is the opposite of people-pleasing. Humble obedience is able to persist regardless of being noticed, and it obeys the superior out of a trust that the work being done is a good work. If the work is a good work, it can be done at all times. It has value. The work itself has value in and of itself, whether noticed or not. For humble obedience to take root, we must have our ultimate capital M master in mind, in whom we are always serving. He is always watching. He sees us. He sets our work before us. Galatians 1:10, Paul expresses this. He says, for am I now seeking the approval of man or of God, or am I trying to please man? If I were still trying to please man, I would not be a servant of Christ. See the connection there. People pleasers are not servants of Christ. Well, we are being called to be servants of Christ. This is the linchpin of obedience under earthly authority. What do we see? It says, as you would Christ. This is the glue to obedience, to seeking this obedience. It's to look towards our slavery to Jesus. The means that bondservants are even able to pursue humble obedience. I don't even think you're able to do this without first looking to your identification as a bondservant of Christ. So 2 takeaways as we wrap up this particular section for us seeking to just not even better submit to earthly authorities, but like able to submit to earthly authorities gracefully and well. I believe in these 2 things. One is that we aim to emulate our obedience to Jesus. We aim to emulate it. We see Paul say it, as you would Christ. Obey with fear and trembling, with a sincere heart, as you would Christ. See, Paul would certainly have us first in our workplaces, as we come into work and we open that door, recall this, that Jesus is both our loving master and king and suffering servant. And the very idea of disobeying King Jesus would not only invoke tremendous fear in us, but also present a lack of reverence for Jesus because of who he is, who he's revealed himself to be to us, how he's lavished us with love. And our sincere obedience to Jesus rests in our complete trust and commitment to him. It's an obedience that never earns to just solely merit itself. That's not the obedience we have to Christ, to merit favor. We've received favor. Therefore, we obey. We have been loved. We've been shown grace. That's where our obedience comes from. It solely responds to what we have received in Christ. Therefore, in the same way, Christians under supervision, remember this obedience you have in Christ. When you go into your workplace, aim to emulate that obedience. What it is, it's echoing the everyday submissive obedience you have to Jesus. We get to do that. That's an honorable thing to do, to echo your obedience to Christ. Okay, second, how to better seek this obedience under earthly authority is to remember this, that our work is wholly for the Lord. And so if we are in fact, like the passage tells us, that we are bound to Jesus, bondservants, slaves to Christ, each of us, we recall that we've been bought with a price. Like that's why you are a slave to Christ, because you have been purchased. How? By the blood of Christ. Your master, his blood was shed for you, the suffering servant. And we are gladly enslaved to Jesus. And so as this identity, bondservants of Christ, if you're tracking with me here, what that means is that we are bound to his will, which is to render our services of work wholly to the Lord, as the passage says, but as bondservants of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart, rendering service with a good will as to the Lord and not to man. And so in this bondage, this slavery to sin, here's what this means, to be a slave to Christ. What it means is freedom. It means freedom. We are bound to freedom in Jesus, slaves of righteousness, set free from sin. We are set free from death, the result of sin, right? Like Romans 6:22, here's what this says. This is good news. But now that you have been set free from sin and have become slaves of God, the fruit you get leads to sanctification and its end, eternal life. This is a different type of slavery. That's why I'm not ashamed to use the word slavery to Christ. Why? Because it leads to sanctification and eternal life and freedom from sin. Guys, we are gladly identified as bondservants of Christ. Do you gladly pronounce yourself as a bondservant of Christ? Like, do you believe you've been set free in this identification? If so, seek the will of God through the rendering of your work. All of your work is rendered to your ultimate master. Remember that your work is for the Lord, whom you've been bound to. This is good news. Okay, so now we're going to move into those that hold earthly authority. So real quick. I want to move into just one caveat here. I know y'all are listening to me today. I'm talking about submitting to your bosses. It's not beyond me that many of you have bosses that you couldn't possibly imagine doing this for. Like, there are bad bosses out there that are wicked, cruel, selfish. They are out there, most certainly. One, just encouragement I want to give you. There's not enough time to really plumb into all this, but first, I'd like to call you to examine yourself prior to examining your earthly master. Like, there may be a case for you to step out of your work. If there is something unhealthy going on, we would love to talk with you about what that looks like. But more often than not, the conflicts that we have with our earthly masters, they tend to find their root in our bend toward disobedience. Like, oftentimes it does start with us, and we are a major contributing factor to the unhealthy relationship we may have with those over us. So let's look to our obedience in Christ, our commitment to Jesus when examining these situations. Lamentation shares with us, let us test and examine our ways and return to the Lord, just as an encouragement. Okay, masters and supervisors, those that have authority. What are the commands we see? We're going to move to the next slide, Jordan. Yes. Masters. What does it say right up front? It says, do the same to them. And so you may look at that, okay, we just talked about obedience. Masters, do the same to them. Maybe you're like, how in the world could a workplace work if there's that happening? Well, if you've been with us the past couple of weeks, you would agree with us that it would flourish, that a mutual sacrificial submission that happens between two parties together, there is a flourishment in that relationship that happens. Marriage, parents and kids, the workplace. Now, before we get into all this, there are a number of like management books that probably could talk about management better than I can. If anything, I'm more equipped to write like How to Be Managed by Wade Ferguson. Like, that's like where I'm a pro. But let's look at what Paul would have us understand about being entrusted with authority. So from what our passage reveals, Paul would likely nod to the advice that if you want respect, if you want sincerity in work from the people that you're over, if you want non-people pleasing obedience, you got to show it. You got to show it. Okay? And so our roles as entrusted managers over people in the workplace, they find most of their fruit by doing the same, by showing the same obedience that we expect to receive. And that starts with knowing who you're over. You've got to know the people you're over. Has anyone ever seen the show Undercover Boss before? It's kind of a silly show. So what happens in Undercover Boss? A person who has an upper management role, they decide to go undercover in their own business as an entry-level like intern or something. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to understand the faults and weaknesses of their company, but also sympathize with their employees. Saturday Night Live did a sketch over this through the lens of Star Wars. And so what they had is Kylo Ren this is like in the most recent trilogy, the like Darth Vader in this one. He decides, I'm gonna go undercover as Matt the radar technician. And I'm gonna sit among the stormtroopers, and I really wanna sympathize with them. So he goes and he works among the stormtroopers, and he really gets an understanding and a sympathy for how hard it is to work under a Dark Lord. Like, it's such a hard job. And so he comes out of that, is like, I've learned a lot, and people are gonna love the new Kylo Ren. I'm gonna care for my stormtroopers. A little bit of a stretch here. But managers and supervisors, we must know who we supervise, okay? We must understand those with whom we've been entrusted authority over. So for you in authority, just a question. In what ways can you display respectful and sincere service to the people you're over? Like, how can you show that you know the people that you're over? Could it look like sacrificing time to spend with them, to understand their growth areas and where they're struggling in work? Could it be a radical recognition, like showing respect, like, look at this work you've done, that's incredible. Like, you are so good at what you do. That's an obedience of sorts, showing a fear and trembling of your own employee and the work they're doing, or caring for their families or their children, checking in on their personal lives. It's just knowing. I work with my dad, and every year we have like an annual review. And he always, I go into this, family business, there's always like a reason to like, hey, I've got a problem with XYZ. And he always just starts off with like, Wade, I'm so proud of the work you're doing. Do you like the work you're doing? The whole annual review just like puts this light on like his care and respect and sincerity for me. And man, I walk out of those meetings like I am aligned with the vision of this company to my death. Like it invigorates me. I want to obey when I come out of these meetings with my boss, who's my dad, double whammy. But I feel that. Like, I feel what Paul is talking about here. Okay, so that's one. The second is stop your threatening. So this is similar to last week. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time here, but guys, it is a dangerous game to lead through threatening. Just like last week, the call of fathers need to stop provoking their children to anger. Managers need to stop doing the same. Like, namely, it communicates like a lack of grace. It destroys brotherhood that Paul is calling masters and servants to. We believe those entrusted with authority must exhibit a peaceful leadership. They must be able to exhibit that for the work to flourish. And so with these two commands, how are those entrusted with authority able to seek this sort of obedience that we're speaking toward? And so the passage goes on saying, knowing that he who is both their master and yours in heaven, and that there is no partiality between them, with him. See, a key humbling truth to realize is that managers and subordinates, they reside within entrusted roles. Both of those roles have been entrusted to them. We believe the Lord has created all roles in our work, and each of you have been entrusted to what you're doing. And you are both equally bondservants to the same master. Like, each person's disposition, regardless of where you are in your work, you look to the same master, to Jesus Christ, who looks upon both masters and servants with zero partiality. He looks upon all of us, regardless of where we are in the hierarchy of work, zero partiality. In Galatians, Paul, he draws a line in the sand here. He says this, there's neither Jew nor Greek, there's neither slave nor free, there's no male and female, for you are all one in Christ. He's calling you to recognize that one identity that we all have as bondservants of Christ, no partiality. And so where servants seek humility by obedience to their masters, masters seek humility in that they too are bondservants along their bondservants, united with them, one unified identity. And in that identity, managers always look to their subordinates respectfully, committed to serving them as they also serve Christ alongside them. Now, to close this morning, I want to share with you a story that I believe these types of stories we all resonate with. So in 2005, President Bush honored Sergeant First Class Paul Ray Smith with the Medal of Honor, who gave his life for his team in a deadly battle outside of Baghdad. President Bush shared that Sergeant Smith was leading about 36 men who were using a courtyard that was next to a watchtower to build a temporary jail for captured enemy prisoners. And on this day, as they were cleaning the courtyard, they were surprised attacked by about 100 of Saddam Hussein's Republican Guard. In that moment of gallantry, Sergeant Smith manned a machine gun on top of a damaged armored vehicle, immediately hopped up top, which led to two results. So one is that Sergeant Paul Ray Smith, he saved about 100 lives that day, not only his 36 men, but there was a base that was behind him. So he single-handedly was the reason that that entire group of guys was not killed that day. So that was one result. The second result was the taking of his own life by the enemy that day. And in a letter that Sergeant Paul Ray Smith, he had written, but he had never mailed to his parents. That was shortly before he had died. It said, he said that he was prepared, quote, to give all that I am to ensure that all my boys make it home. See, we hear stories like this that leave a legacy that extend far beyond we could ever comprehend. Like when we're confronted with men and women who are entrusted with leading people, and then also exhibit an incredible obedience and commitment. Like when we hear stories like this, we just stand in awe. We stand in awe of people like this. That there are people out there that exhibit such radical leadership and sacrifice. Why? Like, why are we drawn to these people? All of us are. I know we are. Here's what we believe. So we are made in the image of God, right? And so we resonate profoundly with those that exhibit the sacrificial authority and committed service that we see in this story because it points directly to Jesus Christ. That's who Jesus is, perfectly. Jesus Christ, the Son of the very God that we have been imaged after. Like, it is in our fabric to be drawn to people like this because God has created us to stand in awe and worship the one who did it perfectly. In Psalm 42, it says, as a deer pants for flowing streams, so pants my soul for you. You were created to worship God. You are created to be drawn toward a God who gave his own son to die for you and then to be your king. We are meant to worship that. That's why you're here every week. You see, we recognize as Christ Church that we worship King Jesus as both our suffering servant and high king. And as such, it's no surprise that we willingly rejoice being bound to him. Like just like Sergeant Smith's men would follow him anywhere, no doubt. They would follow him anywhere based on what he's exhibited. How much more we follow Jesus. How much more we follow Jesus into every area of our life. We follow Christ anywhere, desiring to obey every command while resting in his immeasurable grace. See, we are slaves to Christ. We are set free from sin and willingly bind ourselves to him, seeking Christ all the days of our lives. Guys, the communion table, here's what this sacrament is that we practice every single week. So when we come forward to take of the bread and the wine, it's a sacrament to remember what Jesus did for us. See, this Jesus took on the death that we deserved. He exhibited the most profound service to us that we could ever comprehend by his body being torn and blood shed for you. And in communion, we recognize that we have been united to Christ and given eternal life by grace through faith in Jesus. If you believe this to be true today, that you are a bondservant of Jesus Christ and you have been saved by faith through his death and resurrection, and you celebrate that, we invite you to come to the table this morning.